Salutare, salutare! Astăzi ne vom uita împreună la Alex de la History Legends și vom chibița pe marginea celui mai recent videoclip al său, în care analizează armata britanică. La început, când am văzut subiectul, am spus că merge privit, că Alex face clipuri bune, dar când am văzut cât de bine este pus în contextul conflictului din Ucraina și cât de amuzant este, am spus stop, nu, îl iau de la capăt și îl urmăresc împreună cu abonații mei. Deci am văzut gen primele 5 minute, restul le parcurgem împreună la prima vedere. Let's go!
I think the mighty British Army has fallen. On the 9th of January, the Defense Post released this article. UK hiding critical shortage of military personnel. Others mention how infantry battalions are 30% short of their required target. Meanwhile, the UK Defense Journal says that army recruitment goals have not been met since 2010. What could have possibly happened in the last 15 years?
Leave me alone!
Ați văzut-o? A fost finuța asta. Hai să dau înapoi și atenție ce sugerează Alex. Da, uitați-vă la mulțimea asta și veți vedea și un steag multicolor.
Leave me alone!
Acum.
If we take a look at this,
Da, deci cu alte cuvinte, Alex ne spune că bărbații care se duc la salon să-și pună unghii false s-ar putea să nu fie cel mai bun material de militar, da? Și în principiu nici să nu vrea ei să lupte pentru patria lor. Ok, continuăm.
map, we can see the recruitment level by constituency of the UK from 2013 to 2018. Clearly, most enlisted personnel comes from the west and the north of England.
The king of the north!
Meanwhile, we notice huge empty spots in some major urban centers, like Birmingham. Sorry, my bad. English is...
De ce i-or fi făcut cu stan în capăt? Ce vrea el să sugereze? Burning Stan. Dar uitați-vă aici, frate, la London. Ce gaură mare și albă avem. Ok?
It's not my first language. Birmingham, Leicester, Bradford, and London. Look at that blank canvas. And this is confirmed by the special briefing by the UK Armed Forces. In the 12 months to the 31st of March 2022, only 3% were recruited from London, even though the Greater London area accounts for 13% of the UK's population. Very strange considering that all throughout the 1800s and even at the beginning of the 1900s, London was the biggest source of soldiers for the UK.
Da? Deci Londra era coloana vertebrală a armatei britanice, but not anymore.
Not anymore. I wonder what happened since then.
But when I take a few Yankees around there as a tour guide, I personally have gotten the same response a few times, which is the question, where are all the English people?
Sadly, I think that this failing recruitment campaign...
Deci, ați înțeles, o cauză ar fi că nu mai există prin Londra britanici, cum să spun eu, originali, da? Cei de mai multe generații prin Londra și cei veniți, cetățenii mai noi, cetățenii britanici mai noi, s-ar putea să nu fie la fel de patrioți ca cei care deja au strămoși care s-au sacrificat pentru pământul Imperiului. Da?
It is not a bug, it's a feature. I'll give you a hint. There's a reason why this briefing has a huge section titled Diversity and Inclusion. Although the destructive effects of wokeism is obvious, I think the problem is also more profound. The country is transitioning towards a balkanized society, added to the demographic collapse of the traditional recruitment pool of soldiers. In the year 2000, the mighty British Army was 110,000 strong.
Slabă! Și asta era în anii 2000, da? Deci doar 110.000 de soldați britanici.
By the end of 2023, it went down to 77,500.
77.000 de soldați britanici. cât un onești mai mare. Este armata britanică. Bine, hai că exagerez eu. Dar oricum e nesemnificativă. Ce e asta? Și știm că încă de la începutul conflictului din Ucraina, Marea Britanie a fost una dintre vocile cele mai arțăgoase, ca să mă exprim așa. Dar se pare că nu prea au pe ce pune bază. Sunt tari de gură, dar la faptă sunt mai moi din ce se observă. Păi armata rusă n-are ce discuta cu ăștia 77.000. Ce spune armata rusă? Armata ucraineană, după ce este învinsă de armata rusă, și tot îi rezolvă pe ăștia 77.000. Le spune Putin. Acum că am încheiat noi socotele între noi, dați și voi weekendul ăsta o fugă peste canal și aduceți-mi pe o tipsie de argint Londra. Da?
100 active personnel, and according to UK Defense Journal, it will further be reduced to 73,000 by 2025.
From this day forth, you put your faith in me.
Yet the mainstream media has the nerves to claim British army to become Europe's first line of defense if Vladimir Putin invades.
Yeah,
Cum e?
baby.
To my
Cum
British
să fie
wives,
Marea Britanie prima linie defensivă a Europei? Din contră, britanicii poate de-aia sunt și atât de aspri în declarații, pentru că știu că sunt foarte departe de Rusia. Da? Între ei și Rusia este o întreagă Europa. Și mai este și canalul ăla care i-a scăpat în anii 40 de dictatorul german. Ok? Bine, pe de altă parte, rușii, când le mai răspund britanicilor, că au și rușii niște personaje mai colorate, să le spunem așa, de obicei nu pun problema în sensul că ocupăm Londra, da? Nu. Ci pun problema în sensul că dispare Marea Britanie. Cam așa pun problema. Dacă știți bancul ăla sovietic, da? Cu niște soldați la unitate de-asta, cu rachete nucleare și așa mai departe, dau o beție într-o seară. A doua zi vine comandantul, la ei ăștia erau toți morți, dormeau pe sumese, nu știu ce. Bă, ce ați făcut azi noapte? Și ăștia așa, n-am făcut nimic. Cum nimic? Unde este Belgia? Știți? Cam în termenii ăștia pun problema rușii mai radicali în discurs.
with all due respect, the British army should stay very far away from the battlefield. And it's not me saying it.
UK, the military is too small to fight,
Americani.
according to US generals.
A senior US general told the Defence Secretary that the British Army is no longer regarded as a top-level or Tier 1 fighting force.
There is a point where size does matter. With Ukraine's current attrition rate at the front, it would last a generous 2 to 3 months. This crisis comes at a time where the United Kingdom is going through a strong projection of force. 20,000.
Nu știu la ce s-a referit Alex când a spus că ar dura 2-3 luni de zile. Eu cred că ar dura chiar mai puțin. Da? Un război de genul Ucraina-Rusia între Marea Britanie și Rusia. Probabil că britanicii ar termina muniția în 2 ore și gata. Ăsta ar fi tot război. Mă rog, glumesc, exagerez, dar hei, mai trebuie să și glumim, nu?
UK military personnel deployed across Europe for NATO exercises. The Royal Navy deployed in Guyana. Meanwhile, some more warships and fighter jets are participating in the missile strike campaign against Yemen. For all my Hearts of Iron players, Britain's empty. Now's the time. Despite being the 6th biggest military spend.
Da, dacă britanicii, armata britanică s-a dus 20.000 la exercițiile NATO. Nu știu unde să se războiască cu Yemenul, da? Și au găsit un adversar pe măsură acolo, s-au aliat cu SUA și s-au dus să se încordeze la Yemen. Și atunci, din aia 77.000, cât s-au mai rămas în Marea Britanică? Aud? E cam goală. Păi, hai acum. Ucrainenilor, umflați-vă bărcuțele alea, da, de cauciuc, pe care le folosiți să traversați Nipru și duceți-vă la... Unde-i premiul mai mare? Ce vă trebuie vouă, mă? Hersonul. Marea Britanie, tătuțu!
In the world, they can't even field a proper army. What sort of scam is this? Where's all this cash going? Whoops. UK armed forces face 17 billion pounds black hole in equipment budget. So yeah, the British armed forces are falling apart, mainly because nobody wants to join. And as you can imagine, this has strategic consequences. Here from the Telegraph, UK aircraft carriers can't be sent to the Red Sea because of staffing crisis. Then two Royal Navy warships collided up the coast of Bahrain. And now the HMS Bangor has a...
Și nu tot Marea Britanie a anunțat pe LinkedIn, care până la urmă este o rețea de socializare, una mai serioasă pentru profesioniști, dar hei, totuși. Deci Marea Britanie a anunțat pe internet că oferă un post de viceamiral, scoate un post de viceamiral la concurs și căuta doritori. Da? Îi așteptăm și pe OLX-ul românesc, da? La forțele de muncă. Poate se găsește un general român mai capabil sau poate, de ce nu, chiar Băsescu, poate îi surâde și lui o poziție de viceamiral sau amiral.
Massive hole in its hull. Admiral Nelson would be so proud.
Bă, dar cum a fost, ați văzut, era marea goală, erau doar alea două nave militare și una a intrat în cealaltă. Doamne, ferește-mi, hai să mai vedem faza. Ia uitați-vă. Deci, asta aici, asta a dat cu spatele, să spunem așa, și bang, zic că a dat cu spatele, că altfel nu poți înțelege. Nu se uita în oglindă, ce făcea? De neînțeles. Ia uitați-vă.
And now the HMS Bangor has a massive hole in its hull. Admiral Nelson would be so proud. And it keeps getting worse. On the 5th of January, from the Times, Grant Shapps proposes retiring two amphibious warfare ships, the HMS Albion and the HMS Bulwark, to free 200 sailors amid personal crisis for the Royal Navy. The next day, more warships on the chopping block. Royal Navy forced to retire two frigates due to personnel shortages. 200 years ago, the Royal Navy was able to bully the Chinese fleet into submission. Now, not so much. Now, not so much.
E pe bune asta sau e la mișto? Mai dă capul meu.
Everyone in Britain is talking about this recruitment crisis. Former Defense Minister Ben Wallace said, Gen Z is failing to join the military like my generation did. No shit, Sherlock. Beautiful analysis. I wonder what could have happened. Iraq, Afghanistan, and then the message being shoved down our throats. To cater to this generation of snowflakes, the UK remodeled some of its policies to accommodate Gen Z. 2014, Army has dropped fitness standards to allow more women to
join. Deci sunt și eu acum la prima vedere și rămân și eu cu gura căscată, așa ceva. Wow!
That same year, Army lifts ban on hand and neck tattoos after struggling to attract new recruits. December 2023, from The Guardian, British Army may lift beard ban after 300 plus years. On top of that, roughly 30% of those that enlist are minors. 30% are 16 or 17.
Wow!
So instead of
copii fugiți de acasă, sau ia din orfelinate. Wow.
Trying to recruit older, more mature military personnel, the British Army did a campaign with Fortnite.
Așa ceva?
You would think that removing all the barriers of entry would...
Da, și armata americană face la fel, cum fac și britanicii. Da? Știți că, la un moment dat, vaccinarea cu anti-COVID era obligatorie. Altfel nu puteai să te înrolezi în armata americană. Not anymore. Acum nu, mergi, oricum mergi, hai, te luăm și dacă ești mort cu COVID.
Boost these numbers up. Yet, on the 17th of January, GB News reported, even with restrictions loosened, the British military so far only recruited 5,000 of its required 9,813 over the past year. Many others argue that the main problem comes from the fact that the British Armed Forces privatized their recruitment process to a company called Capita. Since then, slow application process and poor
Cred că râde Putin și cu curul de ăștia pe bune acum. Incredibil, incredibil ce au avut și cum au reușit să strice. Doamne ferește.
housing are to be blamed for enlistment. Whoa. To be honest, they might have a point. This new online application system is causing thousands of potential recruits to ditch their dream of joining the army because the process is too slow and too complicated. I was shocked to learn that 27% of applications took more than 400 days to go from initial application to basic training. What? It doesn't even make sense. I mean, just look at the French Foreign Legion. Within 24 hours of showing up to the recruitment office, you're already sent to basic training. Yet, although Capita keeps failing at reaching required numbers, their contract keeps getting renewed. That's why I think their real job is not to recruit soldiers, but actually to increase diversity within the armed forces, and essentially find bogus reasons to reject the massive surplus of white males. I think that would explain a lot of things. Here from the Telegraph, Royal Air Force diversity drive discriminated against 160 white men.
Băi, ce se întâmplă? Ce se întâmplă aici? Că nu mai pricep nimic. Ce, vor să facă cote egale pe toate rasele, să nu se simtă vreunii discriminați? Care-i faza? Ia. Ce-i cu surplusul masiv de bărbați albi? Care-i treaba?
Essentially find bogus reasons to reject the massive surplus of white males. I think that would explain a lot of things. Here from the Telegraph, Royal Air Force diversity drive discriminated against 160 white men. Guys, it's fine as long as discrimination is positive. Then the article says, the goal was prioritizing ethnic minority and female pilots over better qualified white pilots in order to improve the force's diversity profile. And with that in mind...
Deci am înțeles corect. Doamne, ferește. Bă, trebuie să fie meritocrație, nu diversitate. Doamne, ferește.
Capita adapted the latest recruitment campaigns, I guess to fit modern audiences.
Madness.
Yeah.
I guess to fit modern
Okay.
audiences.
Madness and stupidity.
Did all these efforts pay off? UK says number of military personnel falls to record low. All these woke recruitment campaigns failed to reach the quotas for diversity and inclusion, but convinced a lot of British soldiers to get the F out and not renew their contracts. I even learned that every unit now in the British Army has a trained D&I advisor who ensures that their unit has an inclusive culture. That's literally political commissars. Honestly, what a disaster. With that being said, wokeness alone cannot be the sole cause of this crisis. The Polish military is not known to be woke, yet they're also facing issues replenishing their military personnel. I made a video about Japan and they're also facing the same problems. And even France, for the first time in 2023, is facing a shortage of military personnel. My first thought was that Britain was facing a lower birth rate. I mean, mathematically, it makes sense. If there were more births, there were more young people, and thus, naturally, more people would join the military. Although the fertility rate was higher in the early 1960s, it remained more or less stable since the year 2000. And then if we take a look at this briefing for the British Parliament, in 2000, there were 25,000 new enlistments in the military, and these days, not even 10,000. In 2024, it barely reached 6,000 recruits, a staggering 80% drop since the year 2000. At this rate, we might be witnessing the end of the British military as an all-volunteer force. Now, what about the impact of video games? Back in the days, young men that had the inherent desire to shoot guns and blow up stuff would naturally gravitate towards the military. But nowadays, they can get this out of their system by playing video games like Call of Duty,
Bravo 6. Going down.
and other FPS games like Fortnite. The internet and social media also changed the way young people look at life. A couple of decades ago, if you came from a shithole town in the north of England with little opportunities, joining the army seemed like your best bet. And the entry-level pay as a soldier is pretty reasonable for an 18-year-old without particular skills or education. But nowadays, most young Brits are expected to go to university, and overall they dream of other things. They see young successful people online, they want to get rich, have fun, and travel. They want to experience the Ibiza, the Bali, the Dubai. Now, here's the catch. Historically speaking, the British Army has faced many of such recruitment crises, even at the peak of the colonial empire in the 1800s. What surprised me is that throughout the reign of Queen Victoria, national feeling had never favored the army, and only a minority of ordinary recruits in the British Army enlisted primarily or entirely for reasons related to patriotism. In 1870, the average British soldier was paid a shilling a day. In comparison, an unskilled dock worker could earn 3 shillings, whereas a skilled factory worker more than 7 shillings. The British Army mostly recruited men who needed shelter from civilian life, or those who were forced into it by poverty and starvation. There was this Scottish Parliament member called John...
Deci, asta e ideea, se pare că în trecut recrutau săraci, aia care n-aveau după ce bea apă și erau mulțumiți că, bă, am intrat în armată, nu e cine știe ce soldă, bă, dar măcar am casă și masă asigurată. Acum,
in January 1870,
că toată lumea stă pe TikTok și face bani, o mai au nevoie să se ducă la armată.
he wrote an article called Our Army and the People, where he stated, "The army appears to be the only institution in the kingdom which is outside of the people. They know nothing of it, take no interest in it, and express no opinion on it." Not very different from what we have today, innit?
Some people might need to go into the army, but for me, I feel like I'm fine with what I'm doing at the moment.
But let's go back to Capita. They wrote something very juicy about their marketing campaign. According to them, the 4 core values young people share with the army are respect, fun, hard work, and helpfulness. What about duty, purpose, patriotism, king and country? Alright, that's racist. I think it's pretty obvious what's going on. Military prepares for new push on diversity. Minister of Defense accused of obsession over ethnic balance while armed forces face biggest threat for generations. The Daily Mail, female army recruits are the key to solving armed forces recruitment crisis. To attract this new type of recruits, the British Armed Forces presented themselves just like any other employer on the market. And because they are battling against more competitive industries and companies that are often willing to pay more and provide better work-life balance, they lose. Also, the moment you sign a contract with the armed forces, there's strict discipline and you're in it for at least 4 years. That's a lot of commitment for a generation that jumps from one job to another. And most importantly, being a soldier is not a regular job. Between 1969 and 2024, 1,700...
Deci, deoarece, și acum explic românilor, deoarece a fi soldat nu este o meserie obișnuită, ci este o treabă mai complicată, există anumite compensații. De exemplu, după ce termini armata, da, și ieși la pensie, uneori chiar foarte devreme, iei ce? Pensie specială.
173 British military personnel have been KIA across various conflicts. Not just in Iraq and Afghanistan, but 57% of these fatalities happened to defend the territorial integrity of the United Kingdom. Regardless, it's much more than any of its European counterparts. In 2010, The Guardian even reported the death rate for UK soldiers in Afghanistan was 4 times higher than it was for American soldiers, apart from very patriotic candidates who would sign up for this job. And that's the thing, we know that a lot of ideologically motivated individuals will end up in the military. They're literally ready to sacrifice their life for a flag, despite the UK already scraping the barrels for recruits. In 2021, The Guardian reported, attractiveness of British military for far right continues to be a threat. In October 2022, The Independent doubled down insider threat warning as a rising number of far-right extremists flagged in Britain's armed forces. Yet I wonder how many of these beloved left-wing activists are lining up at the recruitment offices. Spoilers, none. And the irony is that in September 2023, the student union from the University of Bristol...
Da? Deci, în mod logic, da, cei cu vederi de dreapta, dar în sensul european al cuvântului, nu în cel românesc, sunt mai tentați, da, să se bage în armată decât snowflake și, să le spunem așa, de stânga sau decât useriști.
Bristol banned the army from its annual introduction day. And that's the dichotomy UK officials have to face. Now, to really be able to assess the magnitude of this recruitment crisis, we have to look at demographics. According to the briefing to the British Parliament, 77% of the untrained personnel who joined the UK regular forces were recruited from England, compared to 83% of the UK's population living in England. 7% of the recruits were from Scotland, compared to 8%, 5% from Wales compared to 4.5%, and 1% from Northern Ireland compared to 2.7%. For Northern Ireland, it seems like a big gap, but remember that 40% of its population are Catholics that are not so enthusiastic in joining the British Armed Forces. Well, it turns out 10% of this untrained intake was from an unknown location or from a foreign country. That's right, you can become a British soldier if you come from a Commonwealth country. Across all UK regular forces, we have...
Tocmai urma să-i propun luxosul să se ducă acolo și să-și trăiască visul în armata britanică. Nu se poate. Asta e.
4,000 Gurkhas from Nepal, but also strong contingents from Fiji, Jamaica, and Ghana. In recent years, also a lot of Irishmen. In April 2022, the Irish Independent reported British Army records 30% rise in recruits from the Republic of Ireland. I mean, it seems drastic, but in reality, it's not really that many. But still, over the past 3 years, over 300 Irish recruits enlisted into the British Armed Forces. If we go back to the map of the recruitment level by constituency of the UK, it's obvious that most recruits come from rural areas of the north of England and from the southwest. Meanwhile, for Royal Navy enlistments between 2014 and 2018, the counties with the greatest turnout were Plymouth, Portsmouth, Liverpool, Manchester, Newcastle, Middlesbrough, and Preston. Once again, we see that Northern and Western England bring in the most sailors. I mean, we cannot say that Liverpool and Manchester are part of rural areas. So what differentiates these high recruitment areas from the rest of the country? Oh, they must be the poorest ones. Yes and no. On this map, you can see some of the most deprived constituencies of England. Dark green is very poor. We can see the Greater London area, Birmingham, Leicester, Liverpool, Manchester, Bradford, Leeds, and the Northeast. Now if we combine the recruitment map with the poverty map on top of each other, we notice there is definitely a trend. For the North and Southwest, it's almost 1-to-1. Although the region of York is not poor and provides quite a number of British soldiers, the big differences lay in some urban centres, like in the capital London. Although there is a lot of poverty, the enlistment rate into the military is extremely low. Same situation for Birmingham, Leicester, Bradford.
Băi, aflu și eu chestii noi. Deci, Londra, mă rog, am înțeles că nu The City, cu împrejurimile, e prima în top la sărăcie, așa ceva, Doamne, ferește. Wow.
Once again, what differentiates these cities from other English cities? In that same British Parliament's briefing, they bring up the very non-controversial topics of race and religion. For black soldiers, we learned that they represent 3.7% of all military personnel. When black 16 to 25-year-olds, so the target audience of these recruitment campaigns, accounts for 5.6% of the population. So as a group, they're 2 times less likely to enlist. Perhaps The Guardian will answer as to why less than half of black Britons feel proud to be British.
Wow, ce chestie, bă, băiatule, bă. Am aflat numai lucruri noi privind acest clip al lui Alex.
To claim that woke ideology has nothing to do with this recruitment crisis is pretty delusional. How do you expect the younger generations to be patriotic when all you do is smear British history?
Is Britain racist?
Using the same metrics, British Hindus make up 1% of the armed forces compared to Hindu 15 to 25-year-olds, representing 1.5% of the country's population. In 2021, Muslim soldiers accounted for 0.4% of UK regular forces, although they make up 9.5% of the UK's 16 to
9,5%, da? Sunt musulmani în Marea Britanie și cât? Doar 0,50% se înrolează în armată. Ok. 0,4 văd aici. Bun, go.
25-year-old population, statistically they're 24 times less likely to join the British military. And there's another UK government document that states the following about this. The UK Armed Forces should review recruitment campaigns, future recruitment contracts, and HR policies to ensure that more minority faith groups, particularly British-born Muslims, are recruited and retained. Progress should be monitored annually.
Dar de ce oare chestia asta? A? Le e musulmanilor, să spunem, că dacă se bagă în armata britanică vor avea camarazi, cum să spunem, care îi vor persecuta sau cine știe ce? Sau pur și simplu nu le pasă, nene, de perfidul Albion.
I mean, there it is. Capita's job is to fill in these quotas. And in that regards, they're successful. In 2012, ethnic minorities represented 6.9% of British soldiers. And 10 years later, in 2022, 9.6%. Meanwhile, the proportion of women in the UK...
Deci, încă o dată, 9,6. Nu știu ce tot mai bagă un nou subtitrarea asta.
Regular forces increased from 9.6 to 11.5%. Personally, I think the only solution for Britain is to drop all their diversity and inclusion quotas and only accept soldiers on an individual basis, judged by their mental capabilities, the content of their character, and by their fitness skills. And just like Jay Singh claims, the army is not to blame for a lack of diversity. Communities must step up. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you...
Da, sper că v-a plăcut, mie mi-a plăcut enorm. Mulțumesc pentru că ați urmărit clipul lui Alex împreună cu mine până în acest moment și mulțumiri speciale celor care mă susțin pe Patreon și din postura de membri ai canalului. Și acum toată lumea dă cu like și hai la comentarii!